The day my husband called me embarrassing in front of his entire office, something inside me broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly. The kind of quiet that changes a woman forever. I bring revenge stories every day. Subscribe to my channel. My name is Elena. I'm 34 years old, and for 12 years, I believed sacrifice was what love looked like. I supported my husband, Daniel, through everything. When he lost his job at 26, I worked double shifts at the hospital. When he wanted to start his own company, I emptied my savings account without hesitation. When he stayed up all night working, I brought him coffee and kissed his forehead while our baby cried in the next room. And when his business finally became successful, he slowly started acting like he built his life alone. At first, it was little things. He stopped introducing me as my wife. Instead, I became Elena. Or worse, she handles the home stuff. The man who once cried because he couldn't afford to buy me flowers now spent thousands on watches while asking if I really needed new shoes. But I ignored it, because that's what women like me do. We survived disappointment quietly, until one night changed everything. Daniel's company hosted a luxury rooftop party downtown to celebrate landing a multi-million-dollar deal. He told me weeks earlier, "Please don't wear anything too flashy. My investors are classy people." I still remember standing in front of the mirror that night, adjusting the simple navy blue dress I bought on clearance. I thought I looked beautiful. Our daughter Sophia hugged my leg before we left and whispered, "Mommy, you look like a princess." That should have been the moment I listened to the only opinion that mattered. But instead, I spent the entire drive worrying whether Daniel would approve of me. The rooftop was glowing with gold lights and expensive champagne. Women in designer gowns laughed beside men wearing watches worth more than our first apartment. The second we arrived, Daniel walked ahead of me. Not beside me. Ahead. Like he didn't want people associating us together. I felt it immediately. That coldness. That distance. Still, I smiled politely and tried to fit in. Then I overheard something that made my stomach twist. One of Daniel's employees asked him, "Your wife coming tonight?" And Daniel laughed, actually laughed, before saying, "She's here, somewhere. Just don't let her start talking about coupons again." The group burst into laughter. My face burned. I wanted to disappear. But before I could walk away, Daniel looked directly at me and said the sentence that destroyed our marriage. "There she is, my beautiful little charity project." More laughter. Someone awkwardly sipped their drink. Another woman looked at me with pity. Pity. After 12 years of loyalty, that's what I became. A joke. I felt tears rising, but I refused to cry there. Not in front of those people. Not in front of him. So I smiled. A small, calm smile. And quietly said, "Congratulations on your success, Daniel. I hope it keeps you warm at night." He rolled his eyes. "Don't start being dramatic." Dramatic. That word. Men do cruel things and call women dramatic for bleeding from the wound. I grabbed my purse and left the party alone. Daniel didn't follow me. Not even once. The entire ride home, my hands shook against the steering wheel. Not from sadness anymore. From clarity. Because for the first time in years, I realized something terrifying. I had spent my entire life helping a man climb a mountain, only for him to laugh while kicking me off the edge. When I got home, Sophia was asleep on the couch beside my mother. Mom looked at my face once and immediately asked, "What did he do?" And that's when I broke. I sat on the kitchen floor crying so hard I couldn't breathe. Not because Daniel humiliated me, but because deep down, I knew he'd been humiliating me for years. I was just finally ready to admit it. My mother held my hand silently while I cried. Then she said something I will never forget. "Elena, the most dangerous moment in a man's life is when a good woman finally gets tired." I wiped my tears slowly. And for the first time in 12 years, I stopped asking myself how to save my marriage and started asking something else. How do I destroy the man who thinks I'm powerless? And trust me, Daniel had no idea who he had just declared war on. I didn't sleep that night. While Daniel was probably drinking expensive whiskey and soaking in compliments from strangers, I sat at the kitchen table staring at 12 years of my life. Every unpaid sacrifice, every canceled dream, every time I made myself smaller so he could feel bigger. At 3 a.m., I opened our old storage box. Inside were receipts, contracts, tax files, notebooks, and the truth. You see, Daniel loved pretending he built his empire alone. But legally, half that company existed because of me. Back when banks rejected him, my credit score secured his first business loan. My nursing salary paid the office rent for 11 months. And the tiny, temporary investment he always joked about, that was my inheritance from my grandmother. $40,000. Money meant for my future. Money I handed to him because I believed in us. But the most interesting thing? My name was still attached to several original company documents. Daniel either forgot or assumed I was too stupid to notice. That was his first mistake. His second mistake came the next morning. He walked into the kitchen wearing sunglasses, scrolling through his phone like nothing happened. No apology, no shame, just arrogance. "Why'd you leave the party like that?" he asked casually. "People noticed." I stared at him in disbelief. "People noticed?" Not, "I hurt you." Not, "I'm sorry." Only concern about appearances. I quietly placed a cup of coffee in front of him. Then I smiled softly and said, "You're right. I embarrassed you." His shoulders relaxed immediately. Men like Daniel don't want accountability. They want surrender. He smirked. "Good. At least you realize it." Then he kissed Sophia on the head and left for work without another word. The second the front door closed, my smile disappeared. I called the best divorce attorney in the city, and when the receptionist asked, "Is this an emergency?" I replied, "For my husband? Yes." By noon, I was sitting across from a silver-haired woman named Vivian Hart, the kind of woman who looked calm enough to negotiate peace treaties between countries. She listened carefully while I explained everything: the insults, the financial history, the company, the humiliation. When I finally finished, Vivian leaned back in her chair and asked, "Does your husband think you're weak?" I laughed bitterly. "He thinks I'd never leave." Vivian smiled slightly. "Perfect." Then she opened a folder and changed my entire life. "Elena, based on these documents, your husband's company may legally qualify as marital property." I blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means," she said calmly, "your husband publicly mocked a woman who potentially owns half his empire." For the first time in weeks, I felt something besides pain. Power. Vivian spent the next 2 hours explaining things Daniel never expected me to understand. Stocks, assets, shared investments, hidden accounts. And the deeper we looked, the uglier things became. Because Daniel wasn't just arrogant. He was careless. Luxury purchases hidden through business accounts, money transfers, private hotel reservations. At first, I thought it was just financial dishonesty, until Vivian paused at one receipt: a luxury resort, 2 guests, 1 king-sized suite. My chest tightened. The reservation date was 3 months earlier. The same week, Daniel told me he was traveling for business. Vivian looked at me carefully. "Do you want to know who the second guest was?" Part of me wanted to say no, because sometimes the truth arrives like a knife. And once it enters, nothing inside you stays the same. But I nodded anyway. Vivian turned the screen toward me. And there she was, Vanessa Clark, 26 years old. social media marketing consultant for Daniel's company. Blonde. Perfect smile. The same woman from the rooftop party who touched his arm while laughing at his jokes. Suddenly, everything made sense. The late-night meetings, the password changes, the sudden gym obsession, the cologne he started wearing after 12 years of never caring. I stared at her photo silently. Then I asked the question every betrayed wife eventually asks. How long? Vivian didn't sugarcoat it. Based on the records? Possibly over a year. A year. While I packed Sophia's lunches. While I cared for Daniel's sick mother after her surgery. While I defended him to everyone who said he'd changed. He was sleeping with another woman. Something inside me should have shattered. But strangely, it didn't. Because the grief had already happened. This was simply confirmation. I closed the folder slowly, then asked, "What happens if I file for divorce?" Vivian's eyes sharpened. Well, if handled correctly? She slid another document toward me. Your husband may lose much more than his marriage. For the first time in years, I smiled without sadness. Not because I was healed, not because the betrayal stopped hurting, but because Daniel still believed I was the weak woman crying on the kitchen floor. And powerful men become careless. The moment they stop fearing the woman beside them. What Daniel didn't know was that his worst nightmare had finally stopped loving him. Vivian's words kept repeating in my head long after I left her office. Powerful men become careless the moment they stop fearing the woman beside them. I wasn't sure when I stopped being the woman Daniel feared losing, but I knew exactly when I became the woman he started taking for granted. That night, I didn't go home immediately. I sat in my car outside a quiet parking lot, staring at Sophia's school picture on my phone. Her small smile, her innocent eyes. This wasn't just about me anymore. If Daniel wanted to play dirty, he had no idea what he had just dragged his daughter into. At 7:42 p.m., I finally walked into the house. Daniel was already home, music playing softly, wine glass in his hand, like nothing in his world was burning down. He looked at me lazily. "You're late." I calmly took off my shoes. I was busy. Busy doing what? He smirked. Planning another emotional breakdown? That word again, emotional. As if my feelings were a hobby. I didn't answer. I walked straight to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and said, "I met someone today." He didn't even look up from his phone. "Friend? Another broke coworker you want to help?" I turned toward him slowly. "No," I said quietly. "A divorce lawyer." The room went still. Not dramatic silence. The kind of silence that arrives before a storm realizes it has already begun. Daniel finally looked at me and laughed. Not nervous, not confused, genuinely amused. "You?" he said. "Divorce?" Then he stood up, walking closer like I had just told a joke. "Elena, be serious. You don't even have money for groceries without me." That sentence, that exact sentence, it should have broken me. Instead, it anchored me. Because now I understood something very clearly. He didn't just disrespect me. He genuinely believed I couldn't survive without him. I looked him directly in the eyes, and for the first time in 12 years, I didn't lower my gaze. "You're right," I said calmly. His smirk returned, but then I added, "I couldn't survive without you." A pause, then I continued, "But you're going to find out what happens when I stop trying to." Something shifted in his expression, just for a second, but he covered it quickly. "You're being dramatic again," he said coldly. "Go calm down." He walked past me like the conversation was over, but it wasn't, because I had already signed the first papers that morning, and Vivian had already started pulling financial records that Daniel thought were invisible. The next day, everything changed. At 10:15 a.m., Daniel called me from his office. His voice wasn't calm this time. "Elena, did you withdraw money from the joint account?" I leaned back in my chair slowly. "Yes." "Are you insane?" he snapped. "That's company cash flow." I stayed silent for a moment, then asked softly, "Funny. I thought it was marital property." Silence. A long, sharp silence. Then he said something completely different. "Who told you that?" That was it. Not denial, not confidence, fear. The first crack. I closed my laptop. "I think you should come home early today," I said calmly. "Why?" Because I had just received something from Vivian, something that changed everything again. A subpoena request draft, and a financial audit warning, and buried in it, one sentence that made my hands shake. If evidence is confirmed, misappropriation of marital assets may be considered fraud. I looked out the window, watching the world continue like nothing was coming. Then I whispered, "Because Daniel, I think your empire is about to meet your reality." And for the first time since I met him, I wasn't afraid of losing him. I was afraid of how badly he was going to lose everything else. That night, Daniel came home earlier than usual. No music, no wine, no arrogance, just silence. The kind of silence that doesn't belong to a confident man, but to someone who has started questioning the ground under his feet. I was in the living room, sitting with Sophia watching cartoons like nothing had changed. But everything had. He walked in and didn't even take off his shoes. "Elena," he said sharply, "we need to talk." I gently turned the TV volume down. Sophia looked between us, sensing the tension. I smiled at her softly. "Sweetheart, go to your room for a little bit, okay?" She hesitated, then left. The second her door closed, Daniel spoke again. "What the hell are you doing? Lawyers? Bank freezes? Audits?" I slowly stood up. For the first time, I didn't feel small in that house. I felt clear. "I'm doing what you taught me," I said. He frowned. "What does that even mean?" I walked closer, calm, steady. "I'm investing in my future." His jaw tightened. "You're destroying my company." I let out a soft laugh. "No, Daniel." A pause. Then I added, "I'm just asking the world to look at it properly." That hit him. I could see it in his eyes. For years, he survived on confidence, on control, on the belief that no one would ever question him. And now, everything was being questioned. He stepped closer, voice lower. "You really think you can take half of everything I built?" I tilted my head slightly. "Built?" I repeated. Then I nodded slowly. "Let's talk about what you built, Daniel." I started counting on my fingers. The loan I co-signed, the savings I gave you, the unpaid years I supported your startup, the company paperwork that still has my name on it. Each word made his expression harder. Because he knew. Deep down, he knew I wasn't lying. His voice dropped. "You're doing this because of one stupid party?" I shook my head. "No." A beat. Then I said the truth he never wanted to hear. "I'm doing this because that party finally showed me who you are." Silence again. But this time, it wasn't just tension. It was collapse starting to form. Daniel suddenly laughed, but it wasn't real. "You think you're smart now, because you talked to some lawyer?" I looked at him steadily. "I think I'm smart because I finally stopped trusting you." That sentence landed heavier than anything before. For the first time, he didn't respond immediately. He just stood there, like the version of me he knew was disappearing in front of him. Then his phone rang. He checked it. His face changed instantly. "What is this?" he whispered. I already knew. Vivian had moved fast. The financial audit had officially been triggered, and one of his investors had just been notified. Daniel looked up at me,